afternoon, everyone. My name is Jisoo Kim. I'm the director of the GW Institute for Korean Studies. We go by GWIKS here, and also co-direct East Asia National Resource Center. And I'm also Korea Foundation Associate Professor of History, International Affairs, and East Asian Languages and Literatures. Welcome to our first Korea Policy event. This event is co-sponsored by GWIKS and also East Asia National Resource Center. We are very honored and privileged to have Chancellor Charlie Park with us today. Before I have the honor of introducing him, I want to personally thank him for generously welcoming our students who participated in the summer program this past summer. We had our GW and Spelman students go there, and I heard he generously welcomed our students and spent a lot of time with them. So I want to especially thank him for providing that kind of precious opportunity for our students. All right, so today we will have his talk titled Trilateral Strategic Cooperation Beyond the Security on the Korean Peninsula. And I'll first introduce him before I invite him to the podium. Chancellor Choi Park has been the Chancellor of the Korean National Diplomatic Academy since March 31st, 2023. He has also served as a professor at the Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University since 2004. Previously, he was director of Institute for Japanese Studies, dean of GSIS, and director of the Institute of International Affairs at Seoul National University. He also served as president of the Korea Association for Contemporary Japanese Studies in 2017. And in 2022, he served as a senior staff member on the Subcommittee on Foreign Relations and Security of the Presidential Transition Committee. Dr. Park has written a number of books and articles in Korean, English, and Japanese, including a book titled LDP Politics and the Transformation of Post-War Japanese Regime, published by Seoul National University Press in 2011. And he received his BA, MA in Political Science from Seoul National University and has a PhD from Columbia University. So please join me in welcoming Chancellor Park.
Thank you, Professor Jisoo Kim. Thank you for your wonderful and nice introduction. And nice to see you again, Yoon Kim. Whenever I stand in front of the podium like this, and then look at the faces of students, I always it reminds me of the kind of about 30 years ago. I was sitting on the other side of the aisle and then enjoying the lectures from guest speakers, which helped me a lot. I don't know how much I can give you help today, but I'm trying to give you a lecture about the changing foreign policy orientations of the Korean government and the meaning of the trilateral, the cooperation mechanism, established at the Camp David, and the challenges ahead that I feel. And I'm very pleased to deliver a speech today at the George Washington University. And I'm familiar with the Bogi-Batam area than this. I lived at L24, West End area, into 2018, before this corona symptoms. So I feel home if I come back to the DC, and then if I walk around the city area, oh, it feels, and then the weather, good weather like this, I wanted to go out and then walk rather than give a speech. I have titled my speech as a trilateral strategic cooperation beyond the security of the Korean Peninsula, because that's what we are witnessing after the Yoon government started. We are not just talking about the securing Korean people and the Korea as a nation from the North Korean attack. We began addressing the security of peace and prosperity of other regions, including the Indo-Pacific and the beyond. So why we have decided in such kind of direction, that's the kind of start of my speech. So as you can see the kind of very drastically changing foreign policy orientations under the Yoon government. I would single out three main points today. First of all, the Korean government began firmly identifying liberal democracy as a kind of principal philosophy and fundamental guideline for foreign policy. It might sound very natural. The Korea as a kind of a liberal democratic country advocate the liberal democracy and then set it up as a kind of a guideline for Korean foreign policy, but it was not exactly like that. But President Yoon began emphasizing the importance of defending the freedom, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. That should be a kind of core values that should be protected and promoted in the Korean society further. The reason why I support and joined the kind of a presidential election camp was that he truly believed in freedom, liberty, and democracy. So I didn't have an ambition to become a government official, but I wanted to see the Korean liberal democracy truly protected and promoted in the Korean society. And that gives us a kind of the foreign policy direction very clearly, that we have to work with our ally, the United States, our friends and partners, and the like-minded countries in the region. Why? They are liberal democratic countries. So of course, that does not mean that the South Korea wants to shy away from the non-democratic countries and have antagonistic ties with China or North Korea, others. But still, the first foremost principle that we have to keep is that we have to stand on the side of the liberal democracy and market economy. So we made it very clear. As you can remember, in the previous administration, under the Moon Jae-in administration, knowingly or unknowingly, they took the principle of so-called strategic ambiguity. So, it's in the name of balanced diplomacy, right? So I don't know whether that was truly balanced, and how much benefits we have gained from that principle. Just before I came to Washington, D.C., we had a seminar in a local city, and then they have a lots of discussion about Korean foreign policy. And one of the commentators gave a kind of very good comment to that. You know what? The previous regime, the administration's problem was not the issue of a strategic ambiguity. It was more of a kind of thing that they had the ambiguous strategy. They didn't know where to go, and then they didn't know what is the concrete and the substantial benefits we have to gain out of this strategic ambiguity. So instead of that, the Yoon government take a much more clear and transparent principle that we have to stand on the side of liberal democracy. So I think this guideline runs very deep in the Yoon administration. Whenever I think of a kind of what is the kind of single word that can best describe Yoon government's foreign policy, I just surveyed what kind of the words that president use most: freedom and liberty. So that is not kind of just a rhetorical commitment. It's a kind of really polished commitment to promote the liberal democracy in South Korea. So that leads to the kind of a natural extension that we have to be aligned with a liberal democratic countries in a changing world. Foremost example is the United States. The reason why we began improving relations with Japan is that Japan is a liberal democratic country in East Asia, and then promoter of the Indo-Pacific scheme in a larger geographic the landscape. And we share together the fact that we are liberal democratic countries. So it's based on the philosophical guideline that the liberal democracy really matters as against illiberal countries or autocratic or authoritarian regime. And second, the South Korean government's objectives and missions are very clear under President Yoon. we will unite with the like-minded countries against any malicious attempt to undermine their rules-based international order. Why that is important? Because in this the period of the complex transition, you find many countries that do not keep up with the rules-based international order, or some countries wanted to break the rules, ignore the rules, or modify the rules of the game. I would say that Russia is a typical rule breaker, in a sense that even though the Russia is a P5 nation at the United Nations, Russia is violating the very international norm itself. Do not regard the territorial sovereignty. Do not regard the kind of the peaceful resolution of international dispute. Invaded Ukraine by force. So that's against the UN charters. That's against all the international rules that we know. So they are violating rules of the game in the international society. North Korea just simply ignoring the rules of the game in the international society, despite all the UN Security Council resolutions. They continue to launch missiles and develop nuclear weapons, and then try to provoke us. So, and China, I think that China is much more of a kind of a rule modifier. They don't want to just kind of be loyal to the rules-based or the international order led by the United States. Rather than that, they wanted to, I don't think they are substituting the rules in the international society, but they wanted to modify it. I sometimes call the China as a gradual modifier. Of course, if you go extreme, there's one of the revisionist countries. But one of the characteristics of the revisionist countries is that try to challenge the kind of dominant power in the international society, but at the same time, change the rules of the game in the international society. China is doing that. So it's a kind of, so that's the reason why they are trying to change the status quo in the South China Sea, East China Sea, and others. Because they in their mindset, they have different rules of the game. So these rule breaker, the rule ignorer, and the rule modifier, that poses lots of challenges to us. That's the reason why Korea stands on the side of the rules-based international order, because that can give benefits to Korean people and then keep peace and stability in the region and the world. So rather than standing on the other side of the aisle, I think we have to stand on the principle of keeping rules-based international order that tells that gives concrete benefits to Korea. The third, I think underneath all this change in the Korean foreign policy orientations lie the self-awareness that the Korea's global standing has been upgraded immensely. Korea is not a kind of a small country anymore. Ramon Pardo at King's College wrote a book that Korea is a whale, not a kind of small fish anymore. I agree with him in a sense that Korea became the 10th largest economy in the world, and the global trading volume stands almost at the fifth of the world. And then Korea joined the donor giving country. And many people forget that Korea was a kind of poverty-driven, very devastated country after the war, and then we received a kind of foreign assistance for a long time. I still remember, whenever I come to United States, I have a habit of going to the Whole Foods and then try to buy a cornbread. Why? I taste it. It reminds me of the first grade at the elementary school. When I was first grade at the elementary school, the USA, the agriculture aid, because of the agriculture aid, they provided the students a single piece of the cornbread and milk, to provide the nutrition to the little kids in the Korean society. I come to realize that that was a part of the agricultural aid provided by the USAID. So that was the country that we experienced. But now South Korea became a kind of very the able rich country that can help other countries in the world. So because of that awareness that the Korea is a grown up and upgraded, we have acquired the upgraded status. We began advocating the conception that Korea is not just a kind of a middle power. Middle power conception is a kind of the countries, category of countries located between advanced nations and developing countries. We are just standing in the middle. But rather than that, Korea is an upper middle class country. So we have to play a pivotal role in the international community. That's why this government have began promoting the idea of a global pivotal state. So we have to play a pivotal role in the international community. And then international community is not confined to the Korean Peninsula or Northeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific and above. So that's the kind of the conception we have developed under this administration. So you can easily hear that the South Korea tried to become and promote the idea of a global pivotal state, and then try to assume more responsibility and more contribution to the international society. So because of the conception, Korea no longer binds itself in a narrow geographic sphere of the Korean Peninsula. Under President Yoon's leadership, we will reach out to wider regional landscapes to play a proactive and pivotal role in the international community, including not just Northeast Asia, Indo-Pacific, and also going out to the Middle East and then Europe and other countries, other regions, much more comfortably and confidently. So this is a kind of very different policy orientations of the previous administration. We were mired into and preoccupied with the solving Korean Peninsula issue. Of course, that's very important for Korean people, but we should not stick to the idea of solving and addressing Korean issues only, because we have grown up. So we have to play a much bigger role in the international society. That's the underlying conception of the new foreign policy orientation of this administration. So I think at the peak of this global adventure lies the formation of US, Korea, Japan Trilateral Cooperation Mechanism, which was established at the Camp David Summit on August 18th. We have to remember this. US-ROK alliance relationship remained very rock solid from the past and now. US-Japan alliance remained very resilient. Nobody doubts that. What was the weakest link? That was Korea-Japan relations. Even though if it is a triangle, the layer was very strong, but this is a kind of linked by dots rather than by lines. So how to connect them and then make a kind of trilateral cooperation much more stronger, solid, in order to work better to secure the nation in the region. That was the kind of tasks. And I'm very happy to serve this government. I joined the government but gave lots of advices. When I joined it, I just kind of declared I will work on two things: Korea-Japan relations and trilateral among US, Korea, and Japan. And that adventure ended was a very successful adventure, not because of me, but because of wonderful leadership we have. In the beginning, I and other people have to appreciate the President Yoon. Not anymore. He's convinced. He knows what he has to do. So I think we are promoting this idea, and the basis of it is a kind of why this kind of trilateral cooperation became possible. We made a drastic improvement of the Korea-Japan relations. And how that was possible? Because of the strong resolution of President Yoon. Of course, there is a kind of lots of domestic political struggles and then resistances, but still, he has a firm belief that we have to go forward toward a different direction to the benefit of the Korean people and Korea as a country. So I think as President Biden, then the Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon has successfully stabilized and consolidated the trilateral cooperation, the cooperative body. I think that's very meaningful. First of all, the most notable achievement was that the three countries they found ways to avoid any potential reversal or collapse of the mechanism. How to do it? Institutionalize. How to institutionalize it? Second, build a multiple layer of communication and the channels of communication and cooperation. So not only summit meeting, they have created the foreign ministers meeting, defense ministers meeting, the commerce and trade ministers meeting, and national security advisors meeting, later they are joined by finance ministers meeting. So that's wonderful, because even though one column of that dialogue channel may collapse, but other columns will sustain the cooperative mechanism. So this became very solid cooperative body. And the second, the three-way cooperation is not limited to the security issues only. Mainly until quite recently, it was much more about the security cooperation among three countries. But it's not stopping there. We are including not only security, economy, and industry and technology, culture, human exchange. All these things are encompassed in this cooperative mechanism. So it is almost all-encompassing coalition across different across domains. So which will contribute a lot to the kind of functional cooperation on many kind of issues. And third, this trilateral cooperation goes beyond the Korean Peninsula, as I told you. So we are not stopping at the borderline in Northeast Asia. Basically, this trilateral cooperation mechanism is working in the Indo-Pacific region and above, beyond. So of course, it reflects a kind of a very sincere concern of a Korean society that when you talk about the security cooperation, securing South Korea from a potential North Korean attack, that should be standing at the core of a security cooperation. That's there, including a real-time information and sharing about the North Korean missiles and others. But that does not end there. We began talking about economic security in the region, development, aid cooperation, and then developing core technology together and protecting them, and making a kind of international standard. This is a kind of very new. And then try to exchange the future generations, especially in the areas of STEM, science and technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we are trying to grow up the next generation like you, and get connected to each other. So that's a kind of a very new adventure in the trilateral cooperation. So it's not a kind of an extension of the traditional, conventional way of doing business. We are expanding, enlarging, and then deepening the cooperative areas among three countries. So I think this mechanism will stand kind of as a new milestone in a trilateral cooperation, and at that could be potentially more powerful than even a regional groupings like UPAD and AUKUS, because we are institutionalizing much further, and then expanded the areas of cooperation without hesitation, and then talking about not just a local, regional, and global order. So it's a kind of a very new things. So, but as I told you, at the beginning of all this strategic adventure lies the drastic improvement of Korea-Japan relations. How did he do that? That is a kind of a very secret of the achieving this trilateral cooperation on the new front. And I think let me take this opportunity to explain how the Yoon government revisited Korea-Japan relations, because we have critically re-examined the conventional wisdom and tried to upgrade the way of thinking in handling Korea-Japan issues. The first, the new approach stands on a firm belief that Korea-Japan relations should not be plagued by historical controversies only. Of course, historical controversies are very important and would be properly addressed, but we should focus more on establishing future-oriented partnership to usher in a new era of a bilateral relationship. So how to balance the past and the future was that, but the weight is located on the future more than before. And second, the cooperation agendas between Korea and Japan should not be confined to a Korean peace or peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula, because it's much more Korea's the tilted focus. Instead of that, we come to realize that the two countries expanded the scope of cooperation to align efforts and actions in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. So even we talk about Korea-Japan relations, rather than talking about admiring the peninsula issue only, extend it to the larger geostrategic sphere of Indo-Pacific. This is a kind of new way of thinking. And third, rather than being engulfed by retrospective nationalism that puts a spotlight on victims of history, Korea and Japan must turn the page on the years of animosity and begin a new chapter in bilateral relations that benefits all the people in both the society. If you just focus on the victims of the society, it's just much more narrowly focused and a small layer of the people in the society. So widen the scope of cooperation, give concrete benefits to all the people in both the society, rather than just hearing the voices of the victims only. So this is a kind of another new way of thinking in making up new Korea-Japan relations. Also, all these new policy orientations and perspectives have enabled the Korea to set a new tone for bilateral ties. And to make trilateral ties robust and sustainable on the future administrations, the key tool is to maintain solid and sustainable cooperation between Korea and Japan. And Korea already has shown strong political determination to mend the relations and has created lots of concrete action plans to appeal to the wider public in both countries. It is needless to say that Japan's corresponding measures would facilitate the positive move further. I'm still waiting for the corresponding measures from the Japanese side, even though they are trying hard. Some people think that something to be desired. So I want to see more. So all this, we opened the new horizon of the Korea's foreign policy domain. But we have lots of challenges that we are facing, and we have to overcome this in the future. I think in order to make all this going, the most important thing is to maintain and sustain very soundly working Korea-Japan relations, because that was the weakest link. Still, it remains the weakest link. So there is a lot of voices and political forces in the Korean society and outside that wanted to break Korea-Japan relations if chance is available. So that's the reason why we are talking about the kind of importance of liberal democracy more and more. It is interpreted as a kind of 이념 전쟁 in the Korean society, ideological war. No, I don't think that is the case. We wanted to stand against the kind of the political forces or civil society in Korea, in the Korean society that we are against the kind of voices of blind anti-Japanese sentiment. You have reasons to be careful about Japan, but you don't have to be blindly criticizing Japan. And we have to be aware that there are many political forces and then external forces that try to divide Korea and Japan for their own benefits. If Korea and Japan are divided, who are benefited? United States? No. Japan? No. Korea? No. Who are benefited? North Korea and China and Russia. So we don't want to give unnecessary benefits to those countries who wanted to divide us. So how to maintain a kind of very sound and sustainable relationship between Korea and Japan remains a challenge. I think we have to work shoulder to shoulder to get connected, even though there would be many challenges against it. So I think we have to show a goodwill toward each other and try to avoid potential controversies between the two countries and manage the relationship better. But I think we are improving the relationship on an equal basis and on a reciprocal basis, rather than just a kind of kneel down to Japan and then beg their goodwill in order to improve the relationship. So I think this is a kind of a challenge. So how to promote a mutually beneficial relationship in the future and then provide the concrete benefits to the people. That's the kind of challenge. So it should be touchable, palpable, right? Tangible. If not, what is the benefits of improving Korea-Japan relations? We have to show it. It's not just Korea-Japan relations and matters. Even in the trilateral cooperation, we have to make people feel the tangible benefits of cooperative spirit. And second, because of that, I think the second, I always emphasize the importance of early harvest. When you promote a trilateral cooperation, we have to have, rather than waiting for the result in a few years to come, this year and next year, we have to harvest early and show to the people that, you know what, because Korea, Japan, United States relationship has been improved, you are getting exactly these concrete benefits. And then you are much more secured. I was very surprised to see a kind of a very critical comments that because of the increasing security cooperation among three countries, Korean security is endangered. What? Endangered? We are secured because of the tighter security cooperation among three countries. So you don't feel it because the security is like an air. That's Joseph Nye's word. When you live in security, you don't feel it. You live the importance of security only when you lose it. If there is no air, you will immediately realize the importance there. Security is like that. So I don't want to see that kind of situation arrives to us. So security should be secured much in advance. We have to be prepared in order not to lose it. So this, including this kind of security, I think even in terms of economic security, yeah, we can secure much more sustainable supply lines, thanks to the cooperation among three countries. We can collectively respond then to the possible dangers and deficits. So we have to show to the people. That's a challenge. I think the government will work hard to show that tangible benefits to the people by early harvest strategy. And finally, I think after the securing a trilateral cooperation, what remains to us is the kind of how to reestablish a good, sound relationship with China. We don't want to antagonize China. We don't regard China as an enemy. That should be a cooperative partner, but actually in competition. In competition in what? Military capability? No, we are competing in an economic sphere and the sphere of ideas. So, but we have to establish a new kind of relationship. But we don't want to kneel down to China. Respecting China like a kind of middle kingdom, that does not serve the interest of Korea or Korean people. So we firmly believe that the basic principle of setting up a new relationship with China, it should be based on mutual respect. Mutual respect means not just the Korea respecting China, China should respect us. Whenever Chinese friends tell us that you guys have to respect the core interest of China. Thank you, we will. But at the same time, you guys, Chinese, should respect the core interest of South Korea. We haven't said that so far. Yes, we will respect your interest, but we are asking China, samely on the same platform, that you have to respect the core interest of South Korea. If not, it's one-sided. So the mutual respect should be the principle to lead, and then also mutually beneficial ties. So sometimes Chinese seems to say that read my lips and follow my guideline. I don't think that's the case. The kind of we experienced economic retaliation after the deployment thought. That's the beginning of the high rise of anti-China's feeling in the Korean society. Last year, I was so surprised to see that anti-China feeling is stronger than anti-Japanese feeling in the Korean society. First time ever. Why? Especially among the younger generation. They're much more confident. They're much more proud of the nation. They are global. So if China continue to press us and then try to enforce something to the Korean society, no, then we want to keep an arm's length distance from China. So the relationship we wanted to build with China, it should be based on mutually beneficial relationship. I think even though we will try harder to normalize the relationship with China, those two principles will be strictly preserved: mutual respect and mutual benefits to both the societies. And that, I think that's workable. And we are not hurrying up. Okay, if you're ready, we are open to talk to you. But if you enforce something to us, wait. We are going to see new attitude toward us. So I think still at the moment, as you can see, President Yoon's commitment in the summit meeting just last week, we are trying to hold a trilateral summit meeting among Korea, Japan, and China within this year, and maybe possible and highly probable. So that would be a kind of first stepping stone to improve the relationship with China. So I think all this was possible because of the very consolidated, solid cooperative attitude among the three countries in this region: Korea, Japan, and the United States. And I think we will continue to go on. And I think I'm strongly convinced that shared interest and then shared perceptions of about international order, be grounded upon freedom, peace, and prosperity, will continue to help us to navigate the difficulties and challenges that lies ahead of us. After I assumed the position of the chancellor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, I asked the president to write the kind of written message to us, gave us a guideline. He gave a kind of handwritten message, and I just hanged up in the wall. It says, promote global pivotal diplomacy for freedom, peace, and prosperity. And that is repeatedly mentioned by the president and other presidential aides and the foreign ministry. So that's what we are trying to do. And that shows a kind of very different outlook from the previous administration. So we will continue to work on that. I think it was not comprehensive, but I hope you have understood some of the different facets of Korean foreign policy orientations under the new administration. Thank you for your attention, and I'll accept your questions, and I'll try to answer within the limits of my capacity.
Thanks so much for that illuminating lecture. I learned a lot. Actually, there are two things that caught my attention. First, when you mentioned that Korea is now perceived as whale, well, because I start my history.
That's not my word. It's Lemon Pardo's.
Okay. Somebody else's word, but I start my history of Korea class with this idea, a shrimp caught between whales, and how that doesn't capture entire Korean history, but just how it's just about that myth was constructed in the 20th century, but how it was also taught that Korea was always historically and because of its geopolitical location, that it was always victimized. But actually, that's not the case. If you look at pre-20th century Korea, that was not Korea's perception. So related to that, I thought that the idea of global pivotal state and how they're trying to, I think the current administration trying to distinguish itself with other middle powers. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about, so how is that different from middle powers that we know? Because that's not really clear. I know that this administration trying to expand to the global sphere and focus more on global issues, unlike previous administration, focusing more on peace. But if you could sort of elaborate on that middle, how it's distinguishing with other middle powers. And then also just quickly, one more thing about China. Actually, Su-Xiang Wang, Professor Su-Xiang Wang at UCLA, he recently published a book, Boundless Winds of Empire, and that concept of mutual respect in diplomacy is not it's not new, because in Joseon Dynasty, the idea of serving the great is not just about Korea being subservient and serving the great China, but it's really more about, if you look at the diplomacy happening between Joseon and Ming, it was really about mutual respect. So I thought that was, I think his book was very interesting and really does a great job of fleshing out this relationship, or looking at distributor relations and serving the great in a new light. So
I think it's a very familiar discourse that Korea has been regarded as a shrimp between whales, thinking that Korea is a small country and it's endangered by big powers at all times. The survival was the kind of ultimate goal of the Korean society for a long time. But believe it or not, I already wrote a column at 동아일보 in 2008. Korea is not a shrimp. Korea is a dolphin. It's not whale. So the Korea is a whale is a kind of a title of the Raman Pardo's book. But I don't know, Korea is a whale. But anyway, it's much bigger than shrimp, right? So we can navigate through the global community without that fear of being killed by whales. So that shows the kind of the status of Korean society now. If I go out and say that the Korea is a small country, nobody believes us. Korea is not a small country at all. Much bigger than many Koreans think. At least if you look from outside, Korea look bigger. But still, there is a kind of people even now in the Korean society, Korea is a small country, weak country. And that mentality gives a kind of a logical connection to the way of thinking that we are surrounded by 4 big powers: United States, Japan, Russia, and China. So we are cornered and isolated and always surrounded and then harassed by big powers. I think we have to get over this symptom. That gives a kind of notion that Korea is a vulnerable, weak country, and then we have to try to look at the faces of the big powers, and then that's the reason why we tend to have victimized mentality by the great powers. Of course, Korea, we have to be careful not to be victimized anymore. But I think we have to overcome that mentality. Not a small country anymore. Not a victimized country anymore. We have the responsibility to speak to others that you can do it like we have done. And then we have something to contribute to the international society, which is a very different way of thinking. I personally believe it because I have written several articles related to this. And China, the mutual respect, Joseon and Ming, well. That's based on Tensha system, basically. Jogong is a kind of much more tertiary relationship, the superior and inferior. I will take care of you, respect me. That was a kind of the old dynasty relationship, which I don't like. I stand up and speak up.
Yeah,
after getting PhD at Columbia, I taught in Japan for 3 years. And one of the colleagues of mine was an American scholar, very good economist, a Rhodes Scholar, and the same class of Bill Clinton. And he continued to tell me, you know what? You have to remember one single lesson from me. You don't have to be a giant to stand up. I always tell my students, when you have to speak up, speak up. When you have to stand up, right? Don't hesitate. When you have to speak up, you have to raise your voice. But you do not raise your voice at all times. That's noise, right? So the thing is that I think we are ready to respect other countries, but I hope other countries will respect the same way we do. If it is a kind of the one-sided relationship, well, that does not appeal to us at all, especially to the younger generation. Older generation, they have the victim mentality. They have the surrounding mentality, seize mentality. Possibly I'm a very extraordinary person in my generation that does not have that kind of mentality. Why? I was educated in the United States.
Okay. Well, I think I just mentioned Professor Wang's book because I thought it was interesting because that book really kind of introduces this new argument about Joseon, how Joseon kind of actively played its role in constructing its diplomacy in that period.
From the Chinese perspective, yeah. It looks very equal.
All right. I'll take questions. Could you identify yourself and then ask?
I'm Max Gerard. I'm studying international affairs and Asian studies in the graduate program here. I'm really interested in like Taiwan, and I was wondering what Korea's thoughts are on China invading Taiwan. And I know Australia, Japan, New Zealand, the United States have all focused the militaries on basically adapting to rising China, and I'm wondering if Korea is going to do the same.
Well, first of all, whether China will invade Taiwan, we should verify it in reality. They can take a step-by-step fashion to do something else before they raise a kind of a direct and total military attack to Taiwan. So we have to think of all the so-called gray zone security situation rather than invading Taiwan directly, immediately, instantly. So we have to be prepared for that situation. So I think thinking that China will invade Taiwan and then just swallow it instantly, I don't think that will work that much easily. And what Korea can do, we have a lot of discussion inside. So what I want to reveal on all the discussions, but first of all, in times of Taiwan contingencies, the first priority of Korea should be that we have to maintain a strong deterrence and defense capability against the North Korea. That's the contribution to the world. If Korea is collapsed, this is a total chaos. So defend the South Korea from potential North Korean attack should be the first priority of Korea. But that does not mean that Korea will do nothing for Taiwan. We will do lots of things we can do, including logistical and rare area support in times of crisis. But I would say that, frankly, that the first priority of Korea remains the security of South Korea from North Korea.
So Kathy asked, if South Korea's foreign policy is guided by liberal democracy, would Yoon's administration change the way of thinking or stance on Taiwan contingency?
Taiwan contingency?
Yeah.
Well, the principle that the Korea should remain as a liberal democracy and then promoting that idea, it's not a kind of just promoting a liberal democratic idea pursued by Bush administration. That's different. We are trying to protect liberal democracy and liberal international order for the benefits of South Korea. And then if that's related to the kind of Taiwan question, if the defending South Korea and then defending South Korean national identity as a liberal democracy, if it's hurt by Taiwan crisis, we have to defend it. We have to work on something, because Taiwan crisis is not a kind of a fire on the other side of the bank only. That will directly affect Korea, because look at the map. If that Taiwan Strait is closed or endangered, we are blocked within a small sea area and we cannot go out. So we have to take care of the neighboring countries at the same time. That does not mean that we are going to dispatch military forces to Taiwan.
Before you mentioned that you're going to focus on the trilateral cooperation beyond security and think about like STEM and technological field as well. Is it like against China, or would there be like regulations against China? And if there is, what kind of benefits does Korea receive from having those cooperation, trilateral cooperation with Japan and US?
The benefits of that trilateral cooperation?
Like benefits of that, like in technological field, if we are actually
Technological field. Yes, if you read the documents, you can easily guess out, in a sense that three countries have a consent agreed to work on the core and emerging technology in 4 steps. One, co-develop a core technology together, and then try to protect it, because some countries wanted to steal it. Already they developed the technology, so try to protect the technology developed together, and try to make a international standard, because it is a kind of the new core technology area. The core technology area, international standards is not there. So standardized that technology international is needed. And then in order to keep that going, the human exchange, especially in the area of STEM, science and technology, engineering and mathematics, should be promoted. So that's all connected process of technological working together among 3 countries. That benefits a lot, not only to 3 countries, other countries will be benefited. Because we are going to work on many things. The semiconductor, battery, and AI, and quantum computing, the health, many things. So that works for the human civilization, basically, headed by 3 countries. That's the purpose of doing it, working on the technological ground together. If not, they will do alone. So they think that they wanted to create a synergy among three countries to do better.
Hello. Thank you, Chancellor Park. I'm Seokjin Yoon. I'm a student at Johns Hopkins University. I just wanted to ask a question about the corresponding measures of Japan in terms of his history. So I think many Koreans are often skeptical in terms of the Japanese stance in terms of how they felt this process was a bit more top-down instead of bottom-up, as well as it's more unsatisfactory compared to what we saw Willy Brandt do in terms of its historical past. So because Korea already did make this first step in terms of offering its hand, can tangible benefits coming from this alliance, I guess, would it be conducive in order for Japan to make more conciliatory measures in future historical stances? And if they don't, what would be the Yoon administration's stance or mechanisms to ensure that that process is properly dealt with so the peace becomes sustainable? Thank you.
If I may just add, there's one more question related to Japan. So Minhwa Jung is asking about, so you mentioned about mutual respect, and so she's asking if you could assess the past and current Korea-Japan relations in terms of respect, how consistent and sincere each of their respect has been, especially Japan's attitude, and what kind of relationship do you imagine these two countries to create, maintain in the close future?
Okay, very important question, very thorny question, actually. I have dealt with the Korea-Japan relations for 30 years, but I survived. So I think Korea-Japan relations can survive. When I talk about corresponding measures from Japan, of course, as much as possible, that will help us in redirecting the relationship and elevated the cooperative level further. But the basic stance we have is that we don't want to teach or preach Japan what to do. You have to pick up what you have to do, right? We don't want to do it, or we don't want to enforce or pressure Japan to something. That's Japan's choice. You know, they know what they have to do, what should be done. They're not stupid. They know. I don't have to tell them. They know. So they do it voluntarily for their own interest, for the benefits of the two countries and for the future. So I think that's Japan's choice. If they don't do it, that's their strategic failure. Not because we show our goodwill already, and then they have to respond further. They responded, but I hope them respond a little bit further than that. So it's a kind of it's not a, you guys, they studied the kind of reciprocity, right? If it is a tit for tat, it's a negative cycle. Goodwill is responded by goodwill. It will promote a cooperation, and then habits of cooperation will lead to further cooperation. So that's the thing that I wanted to see. And the Japanese attitude, well, every country has their own attitude. But I hope that we, not just Japan, also Korea and Japan, remain very humble and modest when we deal with the historical issues. You know, as a historian, history is very complex. It's not one-sided. There's all different sides. It's like a kind of Rashomon kind of interpretation. Different people have a different conception about the same things. So that's the reason why we have to remain very humble and modest in dealing with the historical issues. And we continue to address the mindset of the people and heart, talk to the hearts rather than minds only. So I think the Japanese right-wingers are very insensitive and try to walk very wildly, which I don't like. But same is true to the very progressive, the left-wingers in the Korean society. They always be repentant and apologize. Yes, I understand the sentiment, but is that the only thing we can do? So we can do better than that. That's my way of thinking.
I know it's 5:03. Is it okay to take one last batch of questions? Okay, student over there, and then student back there, and then
Hello, Chancellor. Thank you so much for your talk. My name is Salamata. I'm a graduate student at Georgetown University. So my question also goes back to these domestic forces. So it seems like there's this narrative domestically in Korea that the closer that ROK seeks to be with the US and Japan, the more that it antagonizes China. And there's this argument that it is pushing China, Russia, and DPRK together to be closer together. So what is the Yoon administration's plan or strategy on addressing this narrative internally and sort of like pushing back against this narrative that this closer cooperation doesn't hurt ROK's interests?
Oh, there's a concern in U.S. naval policy circles that we have too few shipyards here in the U.S. But within South Korea, there's things such as Hyundai Heavy Industries. In Japan, there's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Some of the largest shipbuilding firms in the world. Is there a potential for a sort of joint shipbuilding and ship design like task force similar to what Italy and France did with the Brem frigates? Or like joint naval shipbuilding.
Okay, one last question.
Hi, I am Bev. I'm a graduate student here at the Elliott School. My question is very different from either of those, but you mentioned that South Korea is no longer dependent on the U.S. and
no.
or not like needing its aid, and Korea is now in a position to be able to like help other countries, and while like that like dependency has like lessened on the US, I'm wondering, why does it have to be a trilateral agreement? Why not bilateral? Is the relationship, I know the history, but is the relationship between Korea and Japan projected to be so feeble that it can't stand without the US's intervention?
Russia, North Korea, China alignment is not necessarily in the interest of us. But the first point I wanted to raise is that we didn't make it. They made it for their own benefits. We didn't just push them to coalition each other against us. They did it. They don't like American-led, US-led international order, and then make lots of problems, cause problems to disrupt the rules-based international order, and then try to make it. We are on the defensive side, and I don't know the offensive side of it. They're offensive. We are on the defensive side. That should be emphasized from the beginning. And the second, that I don't know whether they are tightly aligned each other for their own strategic interest. The one thing that they share is that they dislike United States. They want to disrupt the US-led international order. They're in common. But other than that, they have all different ideas about what to be done. We have a very interesting discussion today and yesterday. China may be embarrassed by a rapprochement between Putin and Kim Jong-un. Also China is much more concerned about the reputational risks involved. So how to take advantage of a kind of potential cleavages from within is our challenge. But we have never driven them to coalesce together. They are doing it for their own interest. Wow, joint shipbuilding, this is a very concrete suggestion. I will think about whether that can be done. But Hyundai Shipbuilding and then the Mitsubishi Heavy Industry, they have their own advantages and strengths. There may be some areas they can work together, but not always. Both of those two firms are partly defense equipment industry. But they have worked much more independently so far. They may have some potential to develop technology together and build something together, but not at the moment. So I will think about it, whether that is a kind of possible, and that they have strengths in different the areas of the shipbuilding, LNG shop, or there's a kind of submarine, or frigate and others. So I think we have to study a little bit more about it. What?
What was my question?
Why US needs to be why can't be just bilateral Korea and Japan instead of US being included?
The way to strengthen trilateral cooperation is that the US-Korea relationship soundly working. US-Japan alliance soundly working. But the Korea-Japan was a very weak ties. So how to strengthen ties between Korea and Japan was the kind of the frontline challenge to improve the relationship for the benefits of for the benefits of 3 countries altogether and for the region. But that does not necessarily mean that US, where Korea and Japan cannot cooperate without the United States. We can work bilaterally a lot. Whenever my US friends advise me that, do let me know if there is anything we can do. Okay, you are the last resort, not the first resort. If he cannot solve the problem between ourselves, we will ask for some help, but don't intervene from the beginning. You can give us a friendly advice, but the 2 of us can solve the problem. And that happened. So many people have a conception that the United States pressured a lot to improve the relationship between the 2 countries. I was on the front line. No.
Went a bit beyond our time, but please join me in thanking Chancellor Park for giving very enlightening lecture and answering all of my questions.
Thank you for your attention. Right. So I hope you continue to have interest in Korea and further in the region.